Let's jump to our next story.
Yeah, so this is big news, obviously. It's a North Korea tested yet another ballistic missile last Thursday, the 17th. It's their most powerful ballistic missile. It's called the Hwasong 17, which is interesting because that's the missile that North Korea unveiled a couple of years ago, and it was the Big Daddy missile, and it made waves, but they've had a lot of trouble launching it. So this was, I think, if not the first, a pretty significant advancement in how North Korea is able to launch their biggest missiles, and it landed 200 kilometers off the coast of Japan, which caused Japan and South Korea to be very upset, understandably. And North Korea's, that's the 88th missile, I think, by some measures, that they've launched this year, which is the most they've ever launched, which obviously also contravenes United Nations Security Council resolutions. So pretty big news.
Yeah, I mean, this is another one of those stories where, what do you say? The
Yeah.
the lesson that everybody took away from the axis of evil was that if you want to be the country that doesn't get invaded, you should probably have a nuclear program. It was very hard to look at the countries that were included in the axis of evil and look at the ones that ended up being invaded and which one didn't. And the one that didn't tended to be the ones with more advanced nuclear programs, or which could hold Seoul hostage with massive amounts of regular tube artillery buried in the mountains. So this is one of those issues where, from the perspective of the Kim regime, the nuclear program is their final guarantor of safety. And it is very difficult to see any kind of policy tools that would make them give that up. With that said, is there some way forward where we find a more effective way to discourage this kind of performative saber rattling? And are we giving him what he wants when he tests a missile that is frankly 1950s technology? I mean, ICBMs are not fresh off the rack, and everybody pays attention to him again. I guess my question is, from a policy perspective, given we can't make him give up his nukes, are we actually making a mistake by making this a big deal? And I suspect you disagree.
Well, I agree with the nuclear deterrent being a big lesson out of what you were saying out of the Axis powers. I think that's been shown again by Ukraine, obviously, who gave up nuclear power after the fall of the Soviet Union. And look what happens now. And the way Russia wields that nuclear threat to its advantage. I do disagree that we shouldn't be making a big deal of it. It's obviously what Kim wants. He wants the attention. It's provocation, and it's, if you're again reading deep into the geopolitical teacup of why he's doing it, it's China is probably not unthrilled that he does this, because it gives Japan, South Korea, and the US another thing to think about in the region rather than just focusing on China. But the North Korean state media agency specifically said we were simulating the nuclear attacks on Seoul in Japan. Specifically saying we are simulating nuclear attacks is an absolutely outrageous thing to do in 2022. Not even Russia or any of the others do that. And I think if you ignore it, you normalize it, and you allow them to ratchet it up even further, because we are dealing with someone who wants attention. And if you don't give it, that doesn't mean they go, oh, that didn't work, off I go and just behave myself. They go, okay, well, I actually need to prove that I can do this because no one thinks I'm serious. So like, let's try something else out. So I do think we need to make it a huge deal. And the second reason is that you risk getting into moral equivalency arguments if you start saying, oh, well, that's what they always do. Every time these kinds of outrageous things happen, the international community needs to put a marker in it and say, no, this is bad. Morally, security-wise, everything. This is bad. So I think it's important.
I think that's fair. I think it's also something I guess I didn't think about was, if we tolerate it and if we don't make it a big deal for Kim Jong-un's North Korea, does it send a message that developing ICBM programs is just fine for everyone? That this is just the normal course of doing business? Is there value to being outraged each and every time, even for something that is unfortunately increasingly commonplace, at least where North Korea is? Just to say, we still don't think this is on.
Right. It's an issue, I guess, of calibration there, where you choose to minimize some things. It's a difficult question. You're right.
All right. Next one. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you saw, please give us a like, a comment, and subscribe to the channel to be notified as soon as we put up new videos. Also, don't forget that down below is a link to the amazing International Intrigue free daily newsletter so that you can be ahead of the news at those water cooler conversations. Thanks so much.